Welcome, everyone. Welcome. So Pesach is coming, and we hadn't spoken about Pesach yet, Passover and Pesach. And so here is some exciting thoughts that occurred to me. I'd like to share with you regarding the upcoming Pesach Seder, which is going to be celebrated by millions of Jews across the world tomorrow night. Now, being that on Pesach we celebrate redemption, it's primarily focused to celebrate the redemption from Egypt, that happened 3,336 years ago in the year 2448. However, because we're living in Messianic times, it is highly appropriate to think about the future redemption as well. As we know that the redemption from Egypt was the power and the empowerment for all redemptions, including the future redemption as well. We also know that the whole idea of redemption is that we transcend all limitations and all boundaries. And therefore, the experience of Passover, according to the sages, is that we're supposed to feel as if we are going out of Egypt. And it's not really as if we literally are going out of Egypt. When we follow all the parts of the Seder, if we do it exactly the way we're told to do it, this is the mechanics that takes us out of boundaries of time, and we can do time travel, and we actually experience ourselves leaving Egypt. The enormous godly revelation that took place then is reoccurring in our souls, at least spiritually, to enable us to go out of Egypt. So just like we can move past in time to a past time, we can also move into the future time. As it is also hinted to, where it says that when we mention the going out of Egypt, it says you should mention it even by night. One of the sages mentioned, in addition to mentioning about the going out of Egypt at night, it also says to mention that even in the days of Moshiach and the future times, we'll also speak about the redemption from Egypt. And the deeper meaning over here is a phenomenal explanation by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, where the Rebbe says that what this really means is that there are 2 points which can elevate us no matter where we are. When we're in a good space in our life, which is called daytime. When we're in a bad space or dark space in our life, a time of confusion, which is called nighttime, we can always tap all of our lives. We can tap the going out of Egypt. The going out of Egypt, that power that God has gifted us to raise ourselves out of all constrictions and boundaries, is always available to us. And we get that energy from 2 points. We can draw from the past redemption, we can draw from the future redemption. In other words, we can not only relive an experience that we had in the past, but we can actually tap an experience that we have not yet experienced yet. And yet we can have it now. And the reason for that is because on a very, very deep, sublime level, when we went out of Egypt, we had already the future redemption as well. Because included in that redemption is the future redemption, but it's in potential. It did not manifest. What manifested was only the external part of the redemption, which manifested back then. The internal, the more powerful part of the redemption, although it was downloaded, but we were not given yet the ability to really open it up for full manifestation. Yet, since it was downloaded already on an individual level, personally, for each and every one of us, we could experience it through our mindfulness. Based on the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, where the Baal Shem Tov teaches that the person, the Baal Shem Tov says that the place where a person's mind is, that's where they are, where our thoughts are. It actually transports us to that place. So when we are thinking in our mind, when we are mindful of the times of Moshiach, Messianic age, and the times and the experiences of the future, we are actually entering into the future. We are literally there. And that's true even on any given Monday, Tuesday throughout the year. It can be in December, it can be in January, it can be any time of the year. However, June, July, August, middle of the summer, yet the most powerful time to experience that is on Pesach, because Pesach means to leap. We're lifted up outside of boundaries, outside of limitations, and we can all do it. And the easiest way to travel is in our mind. So what I'd like to do today is share a few meditations to take you through the Seder, in which you can turn your Seder into a future into the future, and especially since we're not dealing with the future, based on all that has been occurring in the world the last couple of years, especially what has been occurring the last few months, especially what has been occurring in the last month with all the miracles we've been seeing, and the incredible, which means we are already in the zone of the up and coming redemption. So definitely we can intensify that Pesach with the proper mindfulness and the proper meditations. So here we go. Now these thoughts you can come up with your own. This is not, I'm not quoting to you things that I've read, although most of what I'll be sharing are thoughts that developed in my mind from the various different sources that I've studied and learned all over the years. But I can say I did not sit down with a book and actually, said I'm taking this thought from this rabbi and this thought from this rabbi. This says this in Chassidus, and this says this. I'm just taking, yesterday I was thinking, I had to give a Shabbos Agadol talk, and I was just allowing my thoughts to formulate the ideas. So I hope that my thoughts were drawing from obviously from God, from the sources of Torah, which I know that they probably are, because that's what I've been teaching all the years. But again, this is not like when I teach and I say I'm quoting to what it says in the book. These are my own thoughts. And what I'm saying is it's okay to be original and to think up whatever you know about the future redemption, and it's meaningful to you. And if it's true and it's real, it's Torah-based, then use that as a meditation. I'm just going to share some of my thoughts with you for whoever is interested to perhaps utilize these particular thoughts at your Seder. So here we go, ready and ready to start. We're going to, in each case, I'm going to present a concept, an idea related to the Seder experience, and then hopefully give you a particular meditation to meditate. I don't know if it qualifies based on all the fancy schmancy meditative people who know how to do really, really super good meditations. This is going to be just a deep thinking, in other words, which is probably meditation. Again, which you can do, and you can do quick meditations when you're together with people. Close your eyes for a minute and just have the intention, have that kavanah, and that is going to be your transport into the messianic experiences. And again, I'm just giving my suggestions, and take it the way you what inspires you, what you're identifying with. Please use it, and then you can come up with some of them your own. Hopefully, from this training exercise that I'm going to share with you now, you'll be able to come up with your own. So here we go. So we start off with the Seder. The fact that we are coming to a Seder is already very messianic. Why? Seder means order. And Moshiach's and the concept of order is very much associated with the messianic Moshiach world, because currently we're living in a non-ordered existence, which means we study this for those who have been learning and joined in our earlier classes throughout all the years. We are familiar with the concept called tohu and tikkun. Tohu is a chaotic state of existence. Tikkun is a rectified state. Now, what we know is that initially when God created the world, our physical world and all the occurrences that happened in early history were all occurrences that were influenced by the world of chaos. Our world is a product of the world of chaos. And that's why there is so much darkness and so much hardship and so much difficulty and so much concealment and all the stuff that make the history of the world be so dark and difficult. And that's because the world is not necessarily immediately reflecting its divine source. And that's because our world is a product of the shattering of vessels of the world of Tohu. Shattering of the vessels means, briefly, that there were intense lights initially. Now, God initially wanted a world where he is concealed, so that the humans and his people can work their way in sorting it out, and then we can participate and be partners in God in creating the magnificent world and bring out the ultimate potential of this world, in which this world will be fully manifest and fully revealing of God in its most magnificent, highest level. And for that, Hashem wanted us to participate. For us to participate, he first had to create a world that is not so clear, a world that is concealing the divine, and then throughout our own labors and works, we are become partners with him in making the world the ultimate garden for God. which means our progress in this world is we have to take the world from a state of tohu, from a state of chaos, and we need to move it into a state of tikkun. The time of Moshiach is called, when we say it in our prayers, we say l'sakein olam, to fix the world. You might know the phrase tikkun olam. The concept of tikkun olam mystically is associated with bringing about the world of tikkun. The world of tikkun is a world of seder, a world of order. So let's explain first what means the non-ordered world. The non-ordered world is a world where there is confusion. And why is there confusion? Because things are misaligned, things are misorganized. And there is a lot of the good potential that's within the creation, within the world, that is not utilized properly, that is not coming, either is not being expressed at all, or if it's being expressed, it's being expressed in a misconstrued, in an unhealthy way, like energies, like a little example of Tohu is a child that is not been educated properly becomes an heir to a multi-billion-dollar, inheritance, and they have all this power and all this money, but they have no rectified vessels to be able to use it in a responsible manner. Instead, they use it in a very messed up way, and to the point that they mess themselves up, and they end up living in extreme misery, although they're having maybe fun initially, but they're living a miserable existence, and for themselves, for everybody around it. They're not bringing any benefit to the world. And that's kind of what I just said is really what the state of creation was at the beginning. The world were a bunch of spoiled teenagers that received an enormous inheritance. What did God give us? He gave us a magnificent, beautiful world, which has such incredible potential to be used for good things. And instead, spoiled people started taking it and misusing all the gifts that God has given for their own selfish and what we might say instant gratification at the expense of everyone else. And that became the dark ancient world where all the evil and all atrocious things were perpetrated. So our job is to fix the world, to bring higher consciousness to the world, to rectify, to give direction to humans, to teach people how to live a life for a higher purpose, for the greater good. In general, the difference between a human and an animal, animals have never taken the resources of this world and developed it. An animal looks out just for himself, his or herself. The animal is involved in immediate gratification, immediate preservation of themselves, but there is no higher idealism in the world of animals. And animals have never taken the enormous power that there is in this world and put it to a proper usage, developed. If humans would not be here, the world would just look the way it was. I mean, in some way it might be better, but in many ways, we would not have brought out the enormous godly potential that God has put into this world. Humans, however, who are entities of the world of rectification, we are products of the world of rectification. So we created civilizations where there is interaction, where there is cohesiveness, where there is harmony, where there is a synthesis between the various different. We learn how to live together. We learn how to put together our resources and our abilities for the greater good, bigger than us, for the future generation, for the improvement of lives of everybody. We all chip in, do our little part, not thinking selfishly and greedily. And then we produce, we move the world forward and forward and forward, advance the world to an improved form of life. We can combat illness. We can combat all kinds of terrible things and make people live a better life. This is the concept of tikkun. But for the concept of tikkun, so that's the idea of rectification. The ultimate rectification, however, in this world comes about through the Jewish people and through the Torah. The ultimate human, the concept of human, is related on a highest level of what means human is human. All of mankind is called human. But the innermost of human, which human means compared to God, the word Adam means Adam meh, a reflection of God, is unique to the Jewish soul, because Jewish people were given a unique task to rectify the world, to direct the world to a higher consciousness, to a higher being, to a higher purpose. And that's why Jews in general are very purpose-oriented. And they're very, very much into contributing to the greater good of society. Whether Jews are religious or they're not religious, there is a certain deep push that's within the we're seeing it today's days. It's influencing so much of the world that is picking up, but that's because Jewish influences has influenced the world so deeply. But the Jewish people have a very innate knack and an innate drive, because our souls come from the world of tikkun, and the world of tikkun is connected to a purpose. The world of tohu exists in a purposeless state. Now, the next thing that's tikkun is Torah. Torah is also called Adam. Adam is man. Torah is called Zosa Torah Adam, because Torah comes to give a higher direction to the world based on God's instructions. In other words, there is the improvements that we're able to make to the world with our limited human minds, and then there are improvements that we do to the world when we improve the world based on God's manual, which is the Torah. So Torah and the Jewish people in this world for thousands of years, learning Torah, doing the mitzvot, what it's doing is it's improving the world and leading the entire world into a state of tikkun. The state of tikkun is going to be in the days of Moshiach. Moshiach is going to be the Messianic era, is going to be when we completed the tikkun of the world, and everything in this world is going to be in its proper place. So it is important to understand that the primary two aspects of the world of Tohu, number one, is that there are energies. What happened in Tohu? Let me just do it very briefly. The world of Tohu originates that God releases an enormous amount of energy. Then energy is not receivable by the vessels. He created vessels to receive it. Let's see the vessels as the underpinning receptors to receive the light, which will later be, serve the piping, if we might say, for creation. It's through these pipelines that God creates the world. But these pipes were not conditioned initially to be able to receive the enormity of the infinite light that God projected. The pipes burst and they broke, and the shards of these divine piping, each one of them had initially rubbed off or connected to this infinite light. So a little trace of that infinity went into these pipes that have bursted, these shards of these vessels. And therefore, what happens is it resulted in a world where there is a lot of energies and a lot of potentials, but they don't have direction. They're in an unholy state. Which means you can have a very, very powerful person with a lot of charisma and a lot of power, and therefore this person has the ability to be able to direct mankind for so much good and for so much wonderful things, can make such incredible contributions. But he turns out, instead of being Abraham, he turns out to be Nimrod. Nimrod means a person who makes mankind rebel against God, and they makes them worship him. He takes advantage of people. He turns everybody into his own subjects, into his own servants, and makes their lives miserable, all to his own benefit. So here you have, and Nimrod wasn't a regular person. He was a human being with an enormous charisma, with an incredible power of royalty in him, a power of governorship, a power of, means it was a divine power. He had a spark of God's kingship, if you might say, in him, but it was misused. It was in a tohu state. That's the concept of tohu. Another individual of tohu was Esau, Yaakov's brother, an enormous person, a person with incredible energies, a son of Isaac and Rebecca. He's got biblical energy in his soul. He's an enormous being, but he was a total wreck. He was someone who was a monster, and he utilized his energies not for the improvement of the planet, but for the denigration of the world. These are all examples of tohu. Okay, now Jacob is the man of the world of tikkun. Jacob is the father of the Jewish people, and he's a person of Torah, and he needs to work his way with his brother Esau, and so on and so forth. I'm just giving you the concept of tohu and tikkun. In our own small little personal lives, our soul is an entity of tikkun, from the world of tikkun. Our bodies, however, and our animal consciousness is a product of the world of tohu. And that's why let's identify the tohu elements in us. And that is, for instance, when we look at our body and we look at our physical earthy consciousness, we see that there are many elements in our lives where we have misguided energy. For example, if you feel within yourself a lot of jealousy to other people, So there is a quality of envy that God has given us all, and envy serves a purpose. If it's used in a tikkun way, we envy righteous people, not envy so much, but envy in a way that we want to emulate them. We want to reach and develop ourselves in a powerful, good way. But when that envy becomes jealousy and extreme ill feelings towards other people, and we're bothered by other people's successes, and we drive ourselves in pain and misery because of it, we suffer from it. That's tohu. That's an energy that is misused. Or we have a capacity for love. God gave us a capacity for love and to through our love build up the world. Love our spouse, love our children. And some people have a stronger capacity for loving and the energy of love. But sometimes our love turns to lust. And when it turns to lust means it's in a tohu state. We start lusting things. And God forbid, the love is not love. A person says, "I love this." It's not "I love." I'm lusting. That's very, 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 very unhealthy, and so on and so forth. I'm painting with a broad brush, but you get the idea. We know within ourselves there's a lot of elements in our lives that are misused energies. Part of our job in this world is through Torah, meditation, through study, through knowing the truths in our mind. We apply these truths through meditation into our consciousness, and hopefully we can curtail these negative energies of tohu and take them slowly, bit by bit, and redirect them where they belong, bit by bit. That's the concept of making tikkun out of the tohu inside of us. So that's one feature of tohu. There's a second feature of tohu, which makes another element of tohu, another downside of tohu, was that when the powerful lights of tohu crushed and shattered the vessels, so some of the energies got squandered, got what we might say fell down. Some of those energies became attached to the vessels, to the messed up vessels, and they become the toxic materials in which so much of the toxicity of the world is created from. The negative elements within creation, the evil inclination and all that dark stuff, all the bad stuff in this world. Fine, but there's something else that happened. The bulk of the energy, instead of it manifesting, and because when it realized it can't manifest, there's no vessels, then these energies went back into their source. And so these are enormous gifts that God wants to give to the world. Powerful infusion of energies that God wanted to initially share with the world. But because those energies don't have the proper vessel, they go back into their source and they remain vesselless. And therefore, they don't come to fruition. Now, that's probably just as bad as misused energy. Misused energy is bad, but also potentials that are there that are meant to improve and meant to bring goodness, unfathomable goodness to the world, but that goodness doesn't manifest because it is hidden. Now, how does that translate on a personal scale, on a personal level? On a personal level, it happens many times that we become connected to something very intense and powerful. We get very excited. Imagine, I'll give an example. Many people discover Judaism late on in their life. They learn, they study, and they get super spiritually excited. And they're so excited. And then they're so excited and they want to share it with all their friends, whether friends in college, friends in school, family members, brothers, sisters, and so on and so forth. But they went to school, they went to yeshiva for a few months. They're so powerfully excited. Judaism has consumed their soul. They're ready to make a complete transformation, keep all of the mitzvot, completely change their lifestyle. For them, they were managed to assimilate this into their life. But when they try to share it to their family, friends, neighbors, and other people, and those people are completely not ready. They're not open for it. It's not a stage in their life when they're open. Whatever it is, they can't handle it. They need to receive it maybe bit by bit, little crumbs. But because this person is so excited, they have all this intensity for them. So this energy would be considered like tohu energy. The fact that they cannot, even though it's a good energy, the fact that they can't articulate it and put it down into tiny pieces, and the fact that the person is not willing to compromise, it's to them, it's all or nothing. If my brother or sister, my parents, my cousins, my college friends, or whatever they are not ready to take on all the mitzvot, I can't talk to them, and I'm not sharing anything with them. So what happens is you disconnect from your family members, which is terrible. No matter how religious you are and how observant you are, you should never disconnect from your family, even if they're not religious. Right? It's important to always keep a connection, and you can influence. But because they don't want to accept everything immediately, because the lights are too intense for them, so take a little crumb. But the Tohu doesn't allow us to do that. So what happens is you stop sharing completely. You withdraw into yourself, and you become frustrated with the outside world, with other people. And so what happens? God appointed you to be an emissary, to direct that light. What do you think? You were drawn to Judaism just for yourself? You're supposed to be a light onto your colleagues, to your friends. You're supposed to share these incredible life-saving and life-giving teachings and improve other people's lives and help them connect to their godliness. But because it's too intense, it's not being shared. So that's the concept of energies of Tohu that remain above and do not come down in vessels. So there's two problems in Tohu. Number one element of Tohu, there's misused energies that get shattered in the shattering and fall into the negative things, and then unused potential. When we went out of Egypt was the time that God selected the Jewish people from amidst a Tohu world, when the world was still actually Mitzrayim. The word Mitzrayim, if I am not making a mistake, is the same numeric value. Egypt has the same numeric value as Tohu. Egypt was completely a Tohu experience. So when we went out of Egypt, means we began to experience Tikkun. And God took us to Sinai, gave us the Torah, which the Torah is Tikkun. And by applying the Torah to the world, we elevate all of the world and we make Tikkun in the world. And the Torah gives us exact instructions how to bring things down into vessels and which energies need to be rectified, what aspects of the world should not be used in their current state. And therefore that's forbidden, it's negative, it's not good, how we should take certain energies and use them in the proper manner. So the Torah is a perfect guide how to implement all of the godly ideals, all that God has to share with the world in a proper manifest way. Okay, and this is a project of thousands of years that we're all involved with. But it begins Pesach by the Seder. So now we can understand why by calling it Seder. Seder means organization, because we organize everything. So therefore, when you're standing by the Seder, and we know that we're sitting now over here moments before Moshiach, so the moment you show up to the Seder and you know you're going to experience an incredible system, and you're being introduced into a Seder world, into an organized state of existence. So meditate for a moment on the fact, can imagine a world where everything inside ourselves, every element in our being is in its right place. There is no misuse of energies. Everything is working where it belongs. My love is where it belongs. My discipline is where it belongs. Exactly measured and according to how much discipline is receivable, what could be, what should not be. The love is tailored and measured in a way that it should come out in a rectified manner. Everything in my life is rectified. It's not just my soul, but my body is rectified. All the features of my body. And even more so, imagine the world that we are going to live soon in, where all of our talents and all of our knowledge and all of our incredible abilities of innovation and so on and so forth, that so many times we gave up on. Was we wanted to share it, we wanted to do something about it, but for whatever reason, we didn't find the right vessels, we didn't find the right ear to listen, we didn't find the tools and the instruments to be able to convey it and to produce it. So as you're entering the Seder, think about the incredible world that we are about to enter into, where number one, none of the energies that we have in our own life, and then think about the entire universe, that everything in this world is going to be rectified. All the use, everything is going to be put to use in its proper function. I'll give you a simple example of a tohu and a tikkun. When they discovered nuclear energy, what was the first thing they did with it? They made nuclear bombs. Now, it had its usage then. It was needed at the moment because the world was in that itself, because the world was in a state where, had there not been this, who knows if the Second World War would have ever stopped. And got it. So it was a usage, and it was put to use, but that's a very, very negative usage of atomic energy. What you can do with atomic energy is you can provide electricity, you can provide energy for millions of people and improving their lives, and so on and so forth. The good that you can do with atomic energy. So you have to take it from Tohu and put it into Tikkun. Imagine when everything in this world, every single potential and every single power in the entire world and in our own personal world and in everything around us is going to be tikkuned. Nothing misused, and all potential is going to come down into actualization. That is awesome. So that is a meditation on Seder itself. In other words, we have never really reached the world of perfect Seder, perfect organization, until the Geula, the redemption, which is about to happen. So let's go there already now. Let's go into that Seder. And by following the Seder at the time of the Seder, you're actually connecting to that world of Seder, of order. Now, the Seder itself begins with, at least the men who make a Seder plate. It's not only men, women can do it as all. The custom by most Seders is that the head of the household makes a ka'ara, a Seder plate. So that's setting up the Seder plate. You put the various different components. A Seder plate consists of, beneath, 3 matzahs, 3 whole matzahs. And then on top of it, we have different components. On the right side, there's like a neck bone. And then on the roasted neck bone, on the left side, you put an egg. And then in the middle, you put a little maror or whatever, right? So so there's a Seder plate. I'm not going to go through the Seder plate now. How do you do it? Basically, according to the Kabbalists, it ends up with a 3 matzahs, and on top of it is an order of 2 triangles, where you put different components which you're going to use by the Seder. So basically, think about this. What you're really doing over here, we know that these components, these are each element that's going on that plate is representing various different emotional energies. So the Zeroya, it's supposed to it really means that arm, even though we use a neck. Most people use a neck, but it's really an arm. The Zeroya represents the right side, which is kindness. So you're tapping this powerful force of kindness. The egg is related to the power of Gevura, to the power of restraint and discipline. When you're setting it up, you're making Seder, because initially on the table you have all these items. You don't know what goes where, so you have to look. You have to open up the Agada, your book that's going to lead you, and you make Seder. You're actually doing that, and think about that how that's affecting on a cosmic level, and psychological level, and in a spiritual level in your soul. You're organizing things to be in the right place, and the very fact that we're making triangles represents that we're not allowing things to be too extreme, because that's part of the mess of the world of Tohu, is that the energies were so extreme that there was no communication between the forces. So there was no symmetry. There was no ability for having things working together. There was no cohesiveness. Everybody had their ideas, and it was my way or the highway. That's it. No one to talk to. The idea of tikkun is to create a harmony, where you take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and you mix it together. And that's the concept of number 3, which takes the 2 forces, the 2 extremes, and harmonizes them. That's why the Seder plate, because it's an element of making Seder and bringing tikkun, it's all set on the order of 3. A segol, a third, so and so. You have 3 matzahs, and then you have the 3 on the top and another set of 3. Now, but there's another aspect over here, is that the Seder plate represents the Malchut. The Malchut means the vessels. What did we say earlier? What's part of the Tohu world? The part of the Tohu world is that the energies, because they're so intense, they run away. They escape back into themselves, because if they don't find vessels, or they feel the vessels are too small and not willing to receive them, they retract into themselves. And we're doing the opposite. We're bringing everything down under the Ka'ara, into the Malchut, into expression, which is so powerful. Because imagine the ability of a person. We have so much, every one of us, every single one of us has so much greatness, so much to share. Everybody is a piece of God from above. You have so much, but as we said before, how much when a soul leaves the word, how many powers and potentials remained unused, remained unfacilitated for whatever reason, because we got burnt or whatever it was. At one point, we tried to share who we are and what we are with someone, and they couldn't handle it, and they said something hurtful to us or whatever it was, and then we escape back into our recesses of our being, into our subconsciousness, or into and hiding in fear, and that's terrible. So the point over here is a full manifestation, a full revelation. And that's going to be in the days of Moshiach. So think about that when you're making the Ka'ara, to be able to be fully manifest, ourselves and everybody around us be in a full state of manifestation. That's going to be in the time of Moshiach. Now we are ready. And when we look at the Seder of the Seder, there are 15 in order. Why is the Seder called a Seder? Because the Seder means order. That means everybody who makes a Seder follows a certain order. Because there are so many things that need to be done during the Seder, so many laws and so many parts to it. So the sages gave us a system in where they codified a code where there are 15 words, and every word is another instruction. And everybody knows that you follow these 15 words. If you follow it with this order, which everybody knows the order, you don't have to have a rabbi by your Seder. Everybody can follow it because they simplified it by giving us the 15 steps. Now, the fact that they gave us 15 steps is another meditation, because 15 is associated with the number of Tikkun, with the world of Tikkun, which is the Messianic world. Why? Because we know in God's names, there are 4 letters, Yud, K, Vav, K. So the Yud and the Hey are the first 2 letters of God's name. Now, Yud is the numeric value, gematria of 10. Hey is the numeric value of 5. So Yud and Hey together is 15. Okay, these are the first 2 letters of God. So the 15 parts of the Seder correspond to the first 2 letters of God's name, Yud and Hey. Now, what is so special about Yud and Hey? Yud and Hey represent the first 2 letters of God's name, Chachma and Bina, which is the intelligence, which is the primary force of the world of Tikkun. The world of Tohu was primarily an emotional world, like emotions. Emotions can run amok. Emotions, if they're not guided by the mind, what happens when anger just becomes completely all-consuming, and there's no rational, there's no reason. Like when someone is angry, you can't reason with them. Or when someone is madly in love, and you know that this relationship is horrific, it's toxic, it's terrible, and you know the person is literally going down a road of utter self-destruction in their love, but they're madly in love. There's nothing to talk of them. So we see when people follow their emotions without the guidance of the intellect, it could be very destructive. It can be very extreme. It can be very, very, very negative. So how do you make tikkun? How do you take tohu, these powerful the forces? And most creation was created in 7 days based on 7 emotions. So the underlying energies of creations of these powerful emotions that drive everything that happens in the world are driven by these emotions. But in order to make tikkun, is you have to tame the emotions. You have to curdle the emotions. You have to weaken them, calm them down. How do you calm them down? That's the intellect. Intellect is reason. By bringing in intelligence and enlightening the emotions. Now, you can't do that at the moment you're very angry. It usually doesn't work. But if you you set yourself up in your life that your mind becomes a governing power in your life, you do mind exercises. First of all, you study the right things. You expose yourself to the right knowledge. And you get, therefore, a path in life. You have an understanding of what we're living here for. You get a higher consciousness of God, a consciousness that fills your mind. From your mind, that mindfulness and that deeper understanding then becomes enters the intelligence enters the emotions, and when the intelligence enters the emotions, they rectify the emotions. They keep the emotions in check. They also harmonize the extreme elements of the emotions, everything to work together. So the secret of making tikkun is the secret of the moichen, yud, and the hey of God's name, which is 15. And now we know that so we say, okay, so what does that have to do with Moshiach? Mind over heart, for sure. And especially if you learn Chassidus, you've been learning Tanya. Tanya teaches us, Chassidus teaches us how to use our mind in a godly way. However, it's all very good, but we don't have today's days access to true mochen, to true chachma bina. What does that mean? That what the divine intelligence that God shared with us, even in the Torah, because the Torah is chachma and bina. The Torah is God's. Ki hu chachmaschem, ki chachmaschem ubinaschem. God said, "This is your wisdom, ubinaschem, and your understanding, le'enei ha'amim, before all the nations." And they will say, only an am chacham, a wise people, the navan, an understanding people is this people. They will recognize the Jewish people as a people of tikkun, the people that can rectify the world because they're a wise people. The Torah is wisdom. However, the Torah that we've received is considered the external part of the Torah, which is, it's coming from the divine intelligence, but it's an inferior level of intelligence. The real highest and deepest intelligence is only going to be shared with us in the time of Mashiach, in the time of the future. And therefore, as much as we can develop our mochen today, it's in a very limited way. It doesn't come close to the mochen development. Mochen means intelligence, the holy, godly intelligence, to the chachma and bina that's going to be in the days of Mashiach. Like Maimonides says, that in the time of the redemption, lefikach Yisrael chachamim gedolim, that in the time of the redemption, the Jewish people are going to be extraordinarily wise. We're going to be super, super knowledgeable. And that wisdom is going to come to the rest of the world. So the knowledge that's going to come, the increased knowledge. We also find that in the land of Israel, the Jewish people not occupied. When the Jewish people came into the land of Israel, they conquered. God gave it to them, but God gave it to them in a manner of a conquest. So they took the land of 7 nations, and then they lived in that land of the 7 nations. However, when God promised Abraham a land of 10 nations. So there are 3 more nations. We only, that in biblical times, when we went in with Joshua, we only captured the land of 7 nations, and we were told that in the future we're going to get the other 3. When is the future? In the current redemption, when Jews are going to be fully taking possession of the land of Israel. The land of Israel is going to become much larger. Another 3 countries are going to be added onto the land of Israel. It's going to be big. Now, the reason why in the future we're going to have the land of 10 nations versus in the past we only had the land of 7 nations is because the 7 represent to the 7 emotions, and the 3 represent the 3 intellectual powers. Earlier, I only spoke about 2 powers, chachma and bina. But there's really a third one of the intellectual powers called das, which is knowledge, and there is a reason why we don't. In God's name, we don't. The das is not a letter of its own. The yud is chachma, which means wisdom. The hey is bina, which is understanding. There's no letter for das explicitly. We're not going to get into it right now, but there's really 3 mochen. Now that element, until now, we were functioning spiritually without our head. It's like we have the Torah's guidance, but it's the more emotional part of the Torah that's revealed to us. And therefore, we're able to physically manifest that in the land of Israel, which was a land of 7 nations. But the pure, objective intelligence, which is going to help us raise our emotions so much higher, has not yet been revealed to us, only in Moshiach's times. That is the secret of this Yud and the Hey, which is 15. So when we start saying, when you say the 15 simanim of the Seder, which are the 15 signposts, many people have the custom that at the beginning of the Seder, they say all of the 15. So when you sing it or say it, stop for a moment and think for yourself, try to think about taking in this enormous divine knowledge that is going to become accessible to us very soon, which is going to dramatically change our entire strata of our emotions. In other words, what is going to make our emotions be so synchronized with truth, with godly living, is because of this incredible enlightenment of the Yud-K that is going to come. So basically what we shared now are 3 meditations, which are really one idea, the concept of Seder, the concept of order, the concept of transitioning from tohu, from chaos, into tikkun. Okay, now we're ready to pick up the cup and start the first part of the Seder. First part of the Seder is making Kiddush. Kiddush is something we do every Friday night. It really means we hold a cup of wine in our hand, and we do it on Friday nights and also on the holidays. And it's basically a declaration of the holiness of the day. And we're thanking God that God has chosen us and given us this special day. And by saying Kiddush, it's like we are bringing holiness into the day. We are, number one, recognizing its holiness, its sanctity, and we are channeling God's holiness into the time. So the Seder begins, it's actually the first of the 4 cups. By the Seder, we drink 4 cups of wine. And this is going to be the first. At the conclusion of saying the Kiddush, we will drink the first cup of wine. So what's the Moshiach meditation over here? Kiddush means becoming holy. Now we know, how do you become holy? By taking in holiness, you become holy, right? That's just the way it is. When you perfume yourself, when you intake perfume, you smell like the perfume. So if you're taking in, or whatever it is, or when you're like, we also know you are what you eat. So whatever you're eating, that's what's influencing, becoming part of you. But it's also if you take in, if you're soaking in something, you're soaking in a lavender, you'll smell like lavender. If you shampoo your hair that way, it will have that smell, right? So if we are taking in holiness, we become holy. And that's the meaning of Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvotav. We become sanctified. How do we take in? How do we download godliness into our lives? Through the doing of the mitzvot. When we do mitzvos, any type of commandment that we do, being that it's God's commandment, we are channeling God's will and God's, whatever the mitzvah is, a certain feature of the infinity of God is now being downloaded into our souls, and from our souls into our bodies, and therefore we are becoming holy. Again, what does holiness mean? Holiness means transcendence. What's transcendence? That which is above borders and boundaries, which means what's really infinite. And who is really infinite? Therefore, the only one that's really holy, only God is holy, because he is above everything. A creation, no matter how magnificent it is, has limits and boundaries, and we can't say it's truly transcendent. It has its borders and boundaries. Yet, even though we are essentially non-transcendent, and we are essentially kind of enclosed in the vessels that make up our finite existence, but because God has given us an ability to attach ourselves to him through his mitzvot, so we channel God into ourselves. In some more romantic terms, we get married to God. And just like a man and a woman first exist completely separated, but when they get married, they become one. So much do they become one that they create offspring, which the DNA of the offspring is a mixture of both of them. That's how one they have become. They've become one flesh, one entity. So we tiny, tiny, finite creatures are able to merge with the infinite God through living his commandments. The more we live the commandments, the more godly we become. The more Torah we know, the more godly we become. The more mitzvahs we do, the more godly we become. However, that's what it means we're holy. So much so that in one of the statements we're going to say when we start doing Sefirat Omer, which starts the second night of Passover, we start counting the Omer, we say a special prayer over there, and we say, Lekachenu, to make us holy, Bikdushascha ha'olyona, with your supreme holiness. We become holy. There's even a Torah portion, next week's Torah portion, where God says, Kedoshim tiyu, you should become holy. And the sages even ask that God says, the verse, Yachol Kamoini, maybe you can become as holy as God. And they seem to imply, no, we'll never be as holy as him. We can only have a little piece of holiness. But in Hasidic teachings, we learn that because the merger can be so deep and so powerful that we can become as holy as him. So much so that in the time of Moshiach, it says that the angels, who are always mesmerized by God's holiness, and when they're by God's transcendence, that's what excites the angels. If the angels have one song that they sing, what do they say? Holy, holy, holy. They can't get over it. That's all they say. For thousands of years, angels are blown away by God's holiness. Yet the sages say, and they derive it from a verse, that when Mashiach will come, the angels will say, holy, holy, holy to the Jewish people. Why? Because after we've downloaded all these mitzvot, so it's almost like we've downloaded God into ourselves. And we are now glowing with God's glow. So what's the difference, however, currently and in the time of Mashiach? Currently, all this divine divinity that we're downloading remains inaccessible to our consciousness. Of course, we're impacted by the Torah we study. Of course, we're impacted by the mitzvot that we do, but we don't really crack it open. We don't really truly experience the true infinite quality that they possess. What it means to feel it and to experience it, I don't know. But I can know a little bit when you look at a great tzaddik, like the Rebbe, for instance. You saw how he had such light shining from him and such incredible to impact millions of people and to do miracles as well. Why? Because to him, these godly lights opened up in his soul. By us, it's locked. That's why, in terms of marriage, the sages say that by the giving of the Torah, we became married to God. But in marriage, there's two stages. The first stage of marriage is called Kiddushin, which means betrothal. Second part of marriage is called Nisuyin. And Nisuyin means completely married. So what does that mean? In earlier days, a man would give a woman in front of two witnesses, according to Torah, a ring. And he said, you are hereby betrothed to me. You become betrothed to me. And we were married, and you are, and then the husband, they become husband and wife. However, she may not go home with him to his house and live together an intimate life. They're not allowed to, because they're still lacking the second phase of their marriage. The second phase of the marriage is they have to go under a canopy called a chuppah, and over there say there's certain blessings. And by doing that, they move into the second stage of marriage. Then they are fully married. Now they can live together. So even though she's considered a married woman, which means she's designated to him, and if she has physical relations with someone else, that's considered full-fledged adultery. But she's still not permitted with her husband to be with him either, until they go under the chuppah and make the second stage of marriage. Now, in times of past, in early days of Jewish history, these two phases of a wedding were done with space in between. So much so that sometimes it would be, usually I think the custom was to wait at least a year between the first ceremony and the second ceremony. Today's days, for whatever reason, we do them together. A wedding ceremony includes these two parts. However, the sages tell us that in our marriage to God, by the giving of the Torah, by Sinai, by the exodus of Egypt, when we went to Sinai, we became betrothed to God. We became his wife, but we did not make it into the second stage of our marriage. And that's the reason why we can't open up to experience the godliness, because we can't feel the intimacy. The godly lights, it's similar to a ring. When a husband gives the first stage of marriage is given through a ring. What's a ring? The ring is a physical object, but the physical is reflecting the spiritual. The physical object is basically saying that just like the ring encircles the woman's finger, so too the man is encircling his wife, which means his energy is not being internalized in her. She doesn't know him yet, but he's already sending his aura on her. He's giving already his energy. It's surrounding her, No other man can touch her. But she is not yet taking it in. When she consummates the marriage, second stage of marriage, she can be intimate with him. Then she can internalize his energy. So much so, as we said earlier, they become so one, they can create a child together. That's how one, that's how merged. So she and him literally become one entity. And she can feel that she is one now with her husband. So the ring represents when it's still hovering above her. So the sages say that the thousands of years of mitzvah observance is all downloading the ring, but we haven't yet experienced the intimacy. When Moshiach will come, we will reach the second half of our marriage, we'll be fully married. So when you're making Kiddush, here is a Moshiach meditation. Since Kiddush means to become sanctified and married to God, actually marriage is called Kiddushin, to become married to God. And since today's days, and throughout all, till the time of Mashiach, we were still left in the first stage of marriage. So can't we incredibly anticipate when you're making Kiddush with the excitement that how fortunate am I to be alive in this awesome time when we are going to marriage, which all of us, which the collective history of all generations never felt. All the godliness of all the mitzvot is going to manifest and open up in our souls. I can imagine that it's unimaginably exhilarating what that experience is going to be. It's about to happen. That is exciting. So we should make a Kiddush with so much excitement about and visualizing. The earlier generations Jews are going to be resurrected to come back to experience it at that time. But we're alive now, and we're going to go into that experience very, very soon. That's the meditation, Mashiach meditation for Kiddush. Now let's go to the next element in our Seder. The next part of our Seder is Urchatz. Urchatz is we wash our hands. The reason we wash our hands is because we're going to eat a vegetable. The vegetable is going to be dipped in salt water, and it gets complicated, but halachically, people used to be careful. Not everybody, today's days, most people are not careful with this, that if you're taking a wet vegetable, you have to wash your hands before that, a ritual washing. Just like we wash for bread today, that we do keep. But the ritual of washing hands for a wet vegetable is something that something we have not done. But on Passover night, for whatever reason, we do that. So you wash your hands. But let's go into the mystical element and what kind of a Moshiach meditation you can have while you do the Urchatz, while you do your washing of your hand after the Kiddush. We know that because of the sin of Adam and Eve, there's a certain impurity that has affected all of mankind. An impurity from the very, very beginning of time. And that impurity is related to self-consciousness, to a feeling of self. We feel ourselves very, very much instead of just being selfless and pure and clean. Tumma, which is the opposite, which means the opposite of purity, impure, it really means, the word tum is related to the word atum. Atum means clogged. Self-consciousness comes from being clogged. The more conscious we are ourselves, because we're closed, we're not open to the infinite truth. When we are open to the infinite truth, then we're just channels of infinite light. And it comes without the less self-awareness we have, the purer the energy can flow through us, the more the energy can flow. That's the difference between a tzaddik. A tzaddik is someone who doesn't think of his or herself all day long. They've transcended themselves. It's purity. Now, we also know the more times in addition to the sin of Adam and Eve, which we call original sin, which has brought a certain clogging to all of humanity and all people, there is additional cloggings that we ourselves clog ourselves. Every time we act selfishly, and especially when we do things we shouldn't be doing, we see things we shouldn't be seeing, we hear things we shouldn't be hearing, we eat things we shouldn't be eating, we study and read things or understand things we shouldn't be understanding, all kinds of impure stuff that are there, they add extra layers of clogging, and we become desensitized to spirituality, we become more obsessed with ourselves, We become more dead because the more obsessed we are with self, the more dead we become, and and less alive. Okay. Now, so we know that we work on cleansing ourselves. There are various different things that cleanse us from impurity. Going to a mikveh, for instance, immersing in a mikveh takes off a certain layer of impurity. God gave us that mitzvah of mikveh. Women go to the mikveh after their menstruation. Men go to the mikveh, especially before holidays. Many men go before every Shabbat. Many men go every day to the mikveh before prayer. It's a form of purity. Another way to purify is tshuva, when we do repentance. Whenever we're feeling a sense of remorse for things that we've done negative, and we verbalize, we follow the instructions of tshuva, that brings purification. Prayer brings a certain element of purification, removing this fog that is a barrier between us and God. However, with all our efforts and with all of our toil, we can only purify to a certain level. The ultimate purification comes from God. Like we say on Yom Kippur, God is the one who purifies. Letaher eschem, to purify you from all your sins. So that's why we all wait for Yom Kippur. As much as we can do teshuvah all year long, and we should do teshuvah, we should repent, but the highlight always is Yom Kippur, because we know that God can do deep cleansing. He can cleanse us on levels of our meditative cleansing, our conscious minds cannot go so deep to clean. We don't even know that we're clogged on these levels. And our subconscious, subconscious on levels of souls that we can't reach. And God can purify. And it's a power beyond us to be purified. Now, even though we get purified on Yom Kippur every year, there's even a higher level of purification. And that's the grand purification that's going to happen when Moshiach comes. When the verse says, God says, I will sprinkle upon you purifying waters and I will purify you. The ultimate purification in the book of Ezekiel, it discusses it. God promises that he is going to remove all impurity. Or like it says in Deuteronomy, it says, God says, I will circumcise your heart. Even though there's another verse that says we should circumcise our heart. Now, circumcising our heart doesn't mean removing any skin, because our heart, that's the physical circumcision on our bodies, but on our heart, it means to remove the clogging. Rashi says the word orla, which is the foreskin, means it clogs. So that when there is orlas halev, there's a clogging on the heart. So there's two verses. One says you should you should circumcise your heart. There's another verse that says God will circumcise our heart, referring to the great purification and circumcision that God will do to us, which means God will sensitize us on levels that we have no clue. And that's what you should do when you're doing orchatz. Think about how amazing it's going to be when those purifying waters are going to come down upon us. We are going to come out, be so sensitive. We won't believe how strongly we will feel things. How prayer is going to be so intense, how powerful, how much we're going to love each other with such a deep and pure love, how much we're going to love a mitzvah, how deeply we're going to experience joy, how powerfully we can experience pleasure, because there's going to be any interference of ego. How clean our actions are going to be. There's not going to be any self-interests, any ego mixed into the things that we. Even when we do good things, there's the self-consciousness gets in and ruins it. Imagine being able to live in a state of absolute purity without that weight, without that thickness and that density. So when we wash our hands, at the time when we know that any moment this purification is going to happen, this should excite us, and let's tune into that purification already when you're doing your netilas yadayim, when you're doing the orchatz. From here, we go to the next phase of the Seder called karpas. Karpas is the taking of the vegetable, and dipping it into either vinegar, or most people use salt water. So you prepare salt water, you take a vegetable. The vegetable can be, many people use a potato, others use an onion, others use a carrot. You take a vegetable and you dip it, you make a blessing, and we eat it. Now, this is meant to remind us of the tears. The salt water is the tears, the enormous pain and suffering that the Jewish people had in Egypt during the Egyptian slavery. And the reason we take this vegetable, which is called karpas, which again, it's not one particular vegetable. There is so many different things people use. But the word karpas, we're told by our holy rabbi, stands for samach. Samach is 60, but in this case it means 600,000, because that's the amount of Jewish people that were there. And the other letters of the word karpas is perach. Perach means backbreaking labor. It's meant to be a remembrance of the 600,000 people that were had forced labor. And as a result of that, were crying bitterly and they shed tears. So the tears associated with the difficult work. That is the karpas. What could this mean when we are standing now moments before the redemption or at the onset of the redemption? What kind of meditation can we have relating to this salt water? I mean, we could think about how many tears the Jewish people shed this year from October 7th, especially the first few weeks after. How much we cried, how much pain, and all the suffering, and all the pain that's in the world, and all the tears, of course. But how can we turn this into a very positive meditation? Not just getting sad. So here is the amazing, amazing thought, which I hope we can remember by the Seder and put us into a real Moshiach place. There is a promise that God has promised, and that's a promise I'm not sure in which book of the prophets it is. Maybe it's Isaiah, but it's in one of the prophets, in which it says, U'mocha Hashem Elokim dima me'al kol panim. That God Elokim God your Lord, is going to remove all tears from ma'al kol panim, from every face. Hashem is going to wipe away all the tears. There won't be any tears left. But let's understand that on a deep level. What does it mean? Why won't there be any tears left? So it says that the word tear in Hebrew is the word dima. Dima is spelled dalid mem ayin hey. The numeric value of the word dima is 119. Dima is the numeric value of 119. So now, the Kabbalists tell us something really interesting. The Rebbe, I saw this in the Rebbe's Sichos by his wife's yard site, Chav Bei Shvat, the 22nd day of Shvat in 57-52. The Rebbe in the footnotes mentions this phenomenal idea. He says the word dima, which is 119, is one less than 120. What's significant about the number 120? 120 is the amount of combinations you can make with the word Elokim. Elokim is one of God's names. And like in the verse, U'mocha Hashem Elokim, that Hashem Elokim will erase the tears. So Elokim is one of God's names. Now we know that when it comes to Hebrew letters, we can organize the letters. Sometimes there's different permutations because the letters mix into different orders. So the Kabbalists teach us that the name of Elokim, it's a mathematical thing. Since it's a word with 5 letters, Aleph, Lamed, Hey, Yud, Mem, you can make, if you play Scrabble, you can take these words and make 120 combinations from these 5 letters. Okay? Now, it says an amazing thing. The name of Elokim is the name where God conceals himself. Elokim is the name of Gevura. It's the name of God's strength and the strength to hide himself. Havaya is the name of God's divine expression, infinite kindness, and Elokim is the name of Gevura, which is the name. Now, Elokim, without the name of Elokim, there would be no creation. Because if God would allow his infinite light to be everywhere, he would overwhelm everything with himself. Everything would revert into God's infinity. So to create space and borders and boundaries and so on and so forth, God utilized the name of Elokim, which is a concealment on Hashem. However, the original Elokim, which means if Elokim would be just in its original first setting, Aleph, Lamed, Hey, Yud, Mem, as God said it, then Elokim would cover up on Havaya just enough to allow us to exist as vessels, as containers, to be the recipients of God's infinite goodness and kindness. And then you would have a world where the world would be perfectly synchronized with God. There would be no evil, no darkness, no pain, no suffering, because there wouldn't be any disconnect. Well, did God create a world that is perfectly connected? No. Because as we discussed earlier, God wanted we should work our way to be close to him. There should be free choice. So what does God do with the name of Elokim? After he initially sets the name of Elokim to be a filter through which he filters his infinite light through Elokim, with Elokim kind of blocking enough so there should be vessels, containers, God now takes the letters of Elokim and creates another formation of it. By rearranging the letters of Elokim, he frames the Elokim in a different frame. And when it's in a different frame, there's a little bit more concealment. And God then reframes Elokim with a different order of the letters, and now it's reframed, and there's even more concealment. It reminds me a little bit of going to the eye doctor, and when you're looking at the letters, and they keep on showing you keep on taking different glass, putting on better, worse, better, worse. You can see it's different levels depending on the sharpness of the glass. So that's what God is basically doing. Every time he's combining the letters of Elokim in a different order, it's creating more blockages. Eventually, it becomes very, very dark. So here's an amazing thing. How many times does God reframe it? 120 times, because there's 120 combinations of the name of Elokim. Every time he adds another combination of Elokim, the world becomes less reflective of God, more independent, more separated, and therefore more corruptible. And as a result of more corruption, more abuse, and more pain, and more suffering, more of October 7th, or more other types of atrocities and darkness. So what did we say? Dima, tears. The numeric value of tears is 119. Because from the 119 combinations of the name Elokim is where tears come from. If we can take the name of Elokim and polish it or reframe and undo, let's say we can move away. Let's first say, imagine we can remove the 119 and leave the original Elokim. That is just a filter that allows for vessels to receive God's light. The world would be perfectly holy and godly. There wouldn't be a tiny bit of pain, and there would never be a tear. So the tears are a direct derivative of 119 reformations of the name of Elokim. Or in other words, when the 120th level is not shining, and only the 119 are blocking the truth of what creation really is, the true potential of the creation, the true reality of everything, the ultimate truth of what creation really is. When we wouldn't have these distortions, and when we can allow all the lower 119, to reflect and allow the highest name of Elokim in its truth, in its proper order to shine through, there is no tears. But when, because of the blockages, the first one of the Elokims, the highest one, the one closest to Havaya, is cut off from us, and we're left only with the 119, that's where there is a possibility for pain and suffering and darkness. So when God, and what's the purpose of our work? Our work is then to polish the name of Elokim, to polish the containers and the vessels, to polish the filters. The filters shouldn't be dusty. They shouldn't be dirty. They should be clean, to Windex it all, or to make that the various different layers should stop being so opaque, to make them more translucent, more transparent, until it becomes like a clean glass. That's the meaning of Oved Elokim. We work Elokim. We have to work Elokim for it to be able to be more expressive of God, more revealing of God. Now, it says an amazing thing. Egypt was the first major workout of the name of Elohim came when the Jewish people were sent down into Egypt. When the Jewish people were sent down into Egypt, they were given the task to break through the darkest elements of the name of Elohim. It says in Kabbalah, and there's a teaching of Ari, that the most concealing and darkest elements of the name of Elohim, where it becomes unbearably dark, are the last 48 combinations of the name of Elohim. The higher letters of Elohim, the first, if you have 48, 120 minus 48, is 120 minus 40 is 80. The lower 78, it's the 78, the higher 78 permutations of Elohim are not so dark. But the lower 48 is where it gets pretty dark. The lower 48 spells the word Chum. You know, Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Chum, and Yafas. Chum. Chum is 48. The Egyptians were the descendants of the Chumites. They are very, 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 very much impacted by the concealments. They are a product of an enormous divine concealment. Doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that there needs more rectification. It needs more refinement in order for it to become receptive of God. And what does God do with the Jewish souls? The first project he doesn't give them the higher parts to polish first. He gives them the hardest part to polish first. He takes the Jewish people from the land of Canaan, from the Holy Land, the land of Israel, and brings them down to the lowest part of the world, the land of Egypt, called Admas B'nei Chum, the land of the children of Chamites. And they have to live in that dark, 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 most concealing, most oppressive regime. No slave ever ran away from Egypt. And they were subjected to the worst torment, to the worst, a place where the Jews felt, where is God? How is he doing this to us? It was unbearable. And boy, oh boy, was there tears. It was a fountain of tears. But the point was, by the time they were done, 210 years of work, they polished so much. Mankind became so refined. See, Egypt was not just to cleanse the Jewish people. It was a cleansing of all of humanity. The world was more refined when we left Egypt than when we went into it. Because the lower 48, it's funny, in America we have the lower 48. The lower 48 elements of the name of Elohim were purified. And we're already ready. Now, the rest of the time, since that day, we're still working on the other 78. Or rather, I should say 77. To purify, to polish. When we're done all the polishing, then it reveals itself, the name of Elohim, for what it really is. And then there's no more tears. So when it comes to the Seder, when we are fortunate to live in our days, when we've already did all the work, the 600,000 souls, the word karpas stands for 600,000. The 600,000 souls have been reincarnated in our generation, we know. We're the same generation that went out of Egypt as us. And we're in the dark world as well now. And we're polishing what sometimes it feels ferociously dark. And we're polishing. We're getting rid of the last vestiges, the last elements of the name of Elohim that are still there, that are still producing a last dosage of tears. But we're finishing up the job. And the truth of Elohim will be revealed. That's the reason why the verse says, Umacha Hashem Elohim, that Hashem Elohim will reveal, because the initial Elohim is meant to be a vessel for Havaya, for God's infinite kindness, for Yud Kei Vav Kei, for the Tetragrammaton. So it doesn't say Umacha Hashem. It should have said just Umacha Hashem. Hashem will erase. No, the whole point is the erasing of the tears is through Elohim, through the rectification of the name of Elohim. That Elohim should not block anymore. The lower framings of Elohim should all be in sync with the first Elohim. And that what Elohim initially was intended to should come through on all levels of existence, all the way down to physical earth. So when you're dipping the karpas, think about that we've concluded all the work of the 600,000 through the labor of history. We're still dipping it in tears, but imagine God himself wiping away every tear. Never to be here ever again. With an incredible understanding that we will be enlightened with why and what was the purpose of all the pain and all the suffering. That's a meditation for the Karpas. Now we continue. And we move into the Yachatz. What's the Yachatz? The Yachatz is the breaking of the matzah. We take the middle matzah, that's called Levi. We split it in half. I realize now it's already getting late, and I'm obligated to go do bedikas chametz, which means search for the chametz. And according to Torah law, I'm not allowed to be teaching Torah now. So, because we're supposed to first do bedikas chametz. So what I will do is I will teach you this last thought about Yachatz, one more, and all the rest of the teachings I will, Be'ezrat Hashem, do a class tomorrow. I know it's Erev Pesach, but I want to finish it and give you the rest of the meditations to take you through the rest of the Seder. So let's do this Yachatz. What's Yachatz? We take a matzah, we split it in half. And the smaller part we put back between the two matzot that's on the Seder plate, and the larger part we put away for Afikomen. Afikomen means for the end of the Seder, it's like called the dessert. Even though it's a dry matzah, it's not so easy to eat by that time. But we leave that at the end, Afikomen. That's what we do now. We split a matzah. So the question now comes, what's the significance of this split from a messianic perspective? What are we doing? And the simple reason why we split the matzah is because we're going to say the Agada. And the Agada, which means we're supposed to relate the mitzvah the commandment is to relate the story of going out of Egypt. And the story of going out of Egypt must be done when matzah is sitting in front of you. Now, matzah is called poor man's bread. In order for the matzah, poor, it's not a fancy bread. It's a very simple bread, a flat bread. It's a very simple bread. Now, the matzah, in order for it to be even more resembling a poor man's bread, we break the matzah because poor people usually don't have a whole bread. They only have a piece. That's the reason we crack the matzah, so we should have this experience of poverty. And on the matzah, and that's where we say the Agada, thanking God to taking us out from this impoverished state and taking us to a state of affluence and so on and so forth. But let's understand that but the point over here, Yachatz means to crack, to break take something whole and break it. Though it seems so anti-Moshiach. Moshiach has taken all the broken pieces and making it whole. Here you're taking something whole and you're breaking it. So I was thinking, what can that possibly be? On the one level, the poor man's bread, poor is important because Moshiach himself is called a poor man riding on a donkey. So right away, when you're creating a poor situation on your table, you can see Moshiach. You can connect to the humility of Moshiach, who will be the most humble person, who is a poor man, who's walking around with a half a matzah. So that's just one thought. But perhaps a more empowering thought that will give each and every one of us power to deal with life, and especially to transition into Mashiach thinking. So there's a fascinating statement the sages say that when the days of Mashiach, and it will come to the ultimate accounting, God is going to sit down and do an ultimate reckoning with the entire world. He's going to do a reckoning with the Jewish people as well. When he finishes his crunching the numbers, he's not going to be too happy. He's going to find that we failed on many, many, many levels. He's going to see so much sin and so many wrongdoings, and he's going to be infuriated. And this is after everything. And he's going to turn to Abraham and he's going to say, your children sinned. And Abraham will have nothing to say in defense, because God is going to show in black and white. Look at this. I've got it all here. Take a look. I have a printout. Take a look at this. The numbers are astronomical, terrible. They did a lot of good, but come on, the sins are much more. And Abraham is going to shrug his shoulders and kind of say, God, you do what you got to do. God is going to turn to Jacob and say, your children sinned, hoping that Jacob is going to figure something out, and Jacob does the same thing like Abraham does. The only one who's going to come to the defense of the Jewish people is going to be Isaac, Yitzchak. And it says that Yitzchak, and that's why there's a verse that says, we will say to Yitzchak, Ki ata avinu, you are our true father. Now it's so interesting because Isaac generally personifies judgment and harshness. Abraham is the man of kindness. Yaakov is the man of compassion. Yet kindness and compassion will not defend us. Who will defend us? Isaac, who personifies judgment. What he's going to do is he's going to begin analyzing this. God is going to hand him the bottom line, the numbers of the sins. And Yitzchak is going to stroke his beard like this, and he's going to say, well, and he's going to start an incredible negotiation with God. First he's going to poke a lot of holes in this number. He's going to say, you say they sinned all the time. Come on, God. So many hours of the day they're eating. They're not sinning, they're eating. I mean, unless they're eating not kosher, but generally, they're eating. They're not sinning. And half of the time, and then part of the day, they're doing other things. There's a little bit of time that, of course, they were praying, and a little bit of time they're doing. We live. We're not living everything perfect, but we're doing. And then there's so much of the day that they're sleeping. By the time you take all this busyness, that they're busy, they don't have time. They weren't sinning. What's left? You're left with a certain amount of time. Even if they filled that entire time just with sin, there's so much that is not sinful. So let's just focus on this little bit. Instead of saying, they're just a bunch of sinners, they sinned all their lives. If you break it down, you see that all of this time, it's a shame I don't have the passage of the Talmud in front of me. I wanted to look it up. I'm not quoting this verbatim at all, but this is kind of the idea that Yitzchak presents. I don't remember exactly how, I know he says so many hours they sleep, and when they're sleeping, they're not sinning. But he also mentions other things, that part of the time they're doing this, and so there's only... So then he says to God, okay, so I can understand there's so much guilt. So let's do a deal. Let's split it in half. I'll take half on me and you take half on your shoulders, and let's forgive him. It's like, you split the bill. If this is what the guy owes. Let's say a guy comes in, he owes a lot of money, he has a lot of creditors. So first of all, you start going through the bill. And you say, this he doesn't really owe. This he already did work and he paid this back. What does he owe? He owes this amount. Okay. Two people together, or you say to the creditor, you forgive half, I'll pay the other half. Kind of that's what Isaac is going to do with God, and that's what's going to save the Jewish people. That's a statement the Talmud tells us in Tractate Pesachim, I think. Pesach is related to Pesach. Yitzchak comes to the defense of the Jewish people. This is an amazing lesson. What is this teaching us? There are so many times in our lives that we have certain things that is just too much to deal with. They're too big. We get upset at people. Like this person, they're so I can't stand them. Their opinions are they're so messed up. They're right. We get upset about their opinions. We get upset about certain things or certain events or elements in our lives that are so they're negative and they're big and the reason they're so threatening and is because they're too big. They're big but if you take it and you use the power of holy gevura, what is gevura? Gevura is the ability to divide something, to splinter it into the details. And you begin to break it down. Then you realize that, I so dislike this person, but you know what? There's something so beautiful about them. This is something I really do like. And this is something, and when they're nasty, how much is there really nasty? You feel the nastiness in everything, but maybe not. When they do this is pretty nice. And this is maybe just a tiny bit, I can deal with that. It just happens to be this one particular thing that really bothers me. So let's figure out how we can change that. So you can take a very ugly, dark situation that looks big and enormous and troubling and it hits you. But as long as you're seeing it just as one piece, that's when it's intolerable. Even to God, he couldn't tolerate it. But with the power of Yitzchak that comes and diminishes the judgment by breaking it down into the particles and the pieces, and then figuring out what can be forgiven, what not can't be forgiven, and how you can deal with the... So imagine Yitzchak in the days of Moshiach going to give to each, just like he does it with God, he's going to empower each and every one of us to be able to do a yachatz, That's where we take the middle matzah, which is the Yitzchak matzah, to be able to take all the elements in our lives that we were never able to deal with, the people that aggravated us, the people that we didn't want to talk to ever again, our siblings, our people, someone that you got into a fight with because of whatever, or the people that whatever the element is, there's something that there's something that is just overwhelmingly difficult and dark and hard in your life and causing so much aggravation. But then our ability to be able to splinter it and break it down into pieces, and then finally be able to negotiate what, how, and then find a way to make it right, and even to forgive. Through the powers of Yitzchak, we will be able to forgive every darkness and every to resolve every fight and every animosity or any hatred. Imagine it when this is going to be applied to the big conflicts in the world, the major arguments and fights that there are between nations, when this method of breaking it down, of working, and you realize how you're not so different in this area and in this area and in this area, and then it's only a little bit that's there that needs to be resolved. Let's figure it out. Holy negotiation. So meditate when you do the yachatz on the high powers of Gevurah that we're going to have access to in the days of Moshiach. And we're going to be able to make right from all the things that are wrong, from all the relationships that we can't enjoy, that are blocked because of whatever. That is an awesome, refreshing experience of holy Gevurah that we're going to have in the days of Mashiach. So Be'ezrat Hashem, we will continue with, I have a meditation for Magid, which is the next part, the beginning of the Agada. Again, what I'm thinking of right now, for Manishtana. So you don't want to miss this one, with the 4 questions, for the 4 sons, and then for the matzah, for the moror, for the Shulchan Orech, festive meal, the benching, the berich, the hallel, the nir. There's a whole lot of goodies coming. So Be'ezrat Hashem, we're going to finish it. God should give me the strength and the ability and the time tomorrow to be able to share it. May we all have a wonderful Pesach. And more than that, we shouldn't have to have meditations. We should have the real deal. Be'ezrat Hashem. Before I even give the next class. Thank you for joining.